Hello, dear friends, and welcome to the program Eye to Eye, where we bring before you the journey of the legends. A teacher par excellence, a brave pioneer, an exemplary leader, the man behind a great institution, nay, an institution in himself, and above all, a very charming and a generous human being. Ladies and gentlemen, we are extremely honored and privileged to have with us today none other than Dr. G.N. Rao, the founder and chair, L.V. Prasad Eye Institute. A very warm welcome to you, sir, and thank you so much for accepting my invitation to the program Eye to Eye.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure.
Dr. G.N. Rao, sir, needs no introduction. Nevertheless, for the benefit of our viewers, I'd like to present a few highlights of his professional achievements.
And here was a man who not only dreamt big but also gave life to his dreams. Dr. Gullapalli N. Rao has been the founder and chair of one of the country's premier academic ophthalmic institutions, which has not only churned out thousands of top-class ophthalmologists practicing throughout the world, but has also contributed to high-level innovative research. In 1986, he founded the L.V. Prasad Eye Institute after a successful career in the US as an academic ophthalmologist. Dr. Rao received his basic medical education in Guntur, Andhra Pradesh and completed his postgraduate residency training at the Dr. Rajendra Prasad Center, AIIMS, New Delhi. He went to the US in 1974 where he was first trained at Tufts University School of Medicine in Boston and later at the University of Rochester School of Medicine, where he continued on the clinical faculty until his return to India in 1986. He has published more than 300 papers in national and international journals and has contributed several book chapters in addition to serving on the editorial boards of several journals. He was a visiting professor at several universities in the US, Europe, Australia and Asia and delivered many named lectures around the world. Dr. Rao has been honored with several international and national awards in recognition of his services to eye care and public health. Dr. G.N. Rao was honored with the Padma Shri in the year 2002. The International Blindness Prevention Award from the American Academy of Ophthalmology and the AEBA Award from the Association of Eye Bank of Asia. In 2017, he was elected to the Ophthalmology Hall of Fame instituted by the American Society of Cataract and Refractive Surgery. Throughout his illustrious career, Dr. G.N. Rao has won numerous distinguished awards and gold medals for his global leadership and outstanding accomplishments as a researcher, ophthalmologist, and humanitarian. He also holds several board and leadership positions in prominent national and international organizations, which include the former Secretary General and later Chair of the Board of and CEO of the International Agency of Prevention of Blindness, former President of Academia Ophthalmologica Internationalis. He was honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award by the AIOS and with the institution of Gullapalli N. Rao AIOS Endowment Lecture by the AIOS in 2020. He was also inducted as a Commander Order of the Star of Africa for distinguished service to the Republic of Liberia and to Africa in Public Service and Sciences by the President of Republic of Liberia. We bow to you, sir. You have made the country truly proud.
That's truly remarkable, sir, and please accept my humble pranams.
Thank you very much.
So you've been a visionary leader with your vision spanning across the globe. But even before we begin to relive that journey along with you, we'd like to know how it all began. So please tell us something about your early days in childhood and in college.
I was born in my mother's native village near Vijayawada, 10 miles from Vijayawada. A village that is on the banks of River Krishna. And then at age 3, I moved to my uncle's place nearby, another village. And I was there until I was 10 years old. So my early education, everything was in that village, a village of the 1950s, as you can imagine. No electricity, no running water, nothing, like a village kid. I think when I look back, I always think that was the biggest gift that I got for my life. That experience of really living in a typical village and experiencing all that. And that has, I believe, made me stronger for the rest of my life. Then at age 10, I moved to Guntur town, now the third or fourth biggest city in Andhra Pradesh. And by then my father established himself as an ophthalmologist in Guntur. So I went there and stayed on until I completed my medical college.
Okay. So before you even took up ophthalmology, had you always planned? Because see, they say life is like a camera, and when you focus on what you want, you capture it perfectly. So when you started medicine, was ophthalmology always your focus?
No, not when I joined medicine, but as I was going through the medical college, one thing I found was that I did not find any other subject more interesting than ophthalmology.
Okay.
The gentle pressure from my father to coax me into ophthalmology worked, and I chose ophthalmology. So that was a simple enough decision for me without having to break my
Think
head.
too much.
The only thing that I wanted was I did not want to do my post-graduation anywhere close to where my father was. So that's why I ran off to Delhi. So then
That was the Apex Institute in the country.
I ended up with Professor Agarwal, as they say, from frying pan to something else. So I did my medical college in Guntur. Then I went to RP Center, where the year of senior house surgeon. In those days, that was mandatory for doing post-graduation, and then 3 years of PG. And in 1974, after completing my PG immediately, the very next day, in fact, I left for the US because that was the year when we went on a 3-month strike of the residents, demanding our stipend should be equivalent to the stipend of the IAS trainees.
Oh. So how did you decide to go to the US?
Always wanted to go for advanced training kind of thing, and so I kept on applying for everything, residencies, fellowships, all kinds. In fact, I did not get anywhere because very tough to get into ophthalmology for a foreign medical graduates. But luckily for me, somebody who was originally selected for the fellowship at Tufts dropped out in the last minute. So I think that was destiny, I guess, and I got that position. So that the rest is history, I guess. And,
yes.
Fantastic in Boston, the intellectual city of the world.
Absolutely fantastic.
Not only world, even though you were at Tufts, you had all the freedom to go to the grand rounds at Massachusetts, INDR, Boston University. All the people who were teachers in those days in those institutions, even today, of course, they were all living legends, so inspiring. And sitting in grand rounds and listening to all of them and the discussions. And even the peer group, the residents and fellows of our such high intellectual power, they were the best of American medical schools.
Must have been a great experience.
A tremendous experience. And then that was the beginning of my thing in America. And then I moved on to the Rochester. As in Boston in those days, the volume of corneal transplants was very low. I didn't get any surgical experience. So I wanted more surgical experience before I became independent. So I did another fellowship in Rochester, which was doing one of the highest volumes of transplants in the US at that time, with Dr. James Acovella. And then halfway through the fellowship, I went up to him and asked him whether he would give me a recommendation for future jobs. And that's when he told me that he was thinking of talking to me and asked me to stay with him. So he said, what do you think? And I said, yes, I'm going to continue. I never asked him what the salary was going to be. I never said I had to talk to my wife or any such thing. Because the work was so exciting, a combination.
It was in the 80s, right?
This was in 77, 78. That's when I was in Rochester Fellowship.
Yeah. So, but you were there till 1986, right? Till you gained a lot of expertise there.
74, I ended in America.
Hmm.
Then 86, I left America.
So then,
So 3 years of fellowship I did, and that gave me the real foundation. And the third year was when I began to work on the area of corneal endothelium. That was my research, because specular microscopy was just new. There were only 4 machines in the entire world at that time. One was ours. So I began to work. They gave me the machine and said, this was your research project. I said, how do I use it? We don't know, you figure it out. So I had to figure it out, how to make it work. And then one day suddenly I saw endothelium. And then that was a great area. That year alone, I published 14 papers.
Wow, that's amazing.
In addition to sitting in the operating room in the evenings with iBank eyes practicing surgery, because I never used microscope until then. Because before I left India, we did not have operating microscopes.
You used to use the loops at that time?
Yeah, quite often, not even loops. We were just doing with naked eye, and then loops. So surgical training, research, and then clinical work. A busy year. And that was a good investment. And then I continued there for another 10 years on the faculty. Then I became the medical director of the iBank, director of the cornea research laboratory at the university. And then around 81, early 82, my wife and I sat down and said, it's about time that we go back. We have to plan to go back. Otherwise, we'll never go back.
What brought you back to India?
Nothing in particular, except that we always wanted to come back, and that did not change. Because we felt very strongly in a poor country like ours, families like ours and people like us got the most out of this country. That we have to give back a little bit from whatever we can. So that was the simple feeling with which we came back. And in 86, we landed here. Around summer of 85, I was introduced to Mr. Prasad's son, L.V. Prasad's son, who was visiting the US by a mutual friend.
Okay.
And then that conversation, they said that they had money they were thinking of giving to a good medical project. So I sent my project report, and 4 months later, I was in India in January 86. When I met them, and both father and son told me that they have decided to support us. That's the reason we named it after him. But the actual trust name, which was founded a year earlier in Hyderabad, was Hyderabad Eye Institute.
Okay.
By then, we had land from the government of Andhra Pradesh. Mr. N.T. Ramarao allocated 8 acres of land, which is halfway between our institute now and the airport.
Oh.
That's where we have the optometry school and all our public health training and research, everything there, and on that campus. So that land was already available. The original plan was to raise money in the US for equipment, use that land for building, take a small bank loan after returning and start building and then get moving. But Mr. Prasad coming into picture, he donated the land in Banjara Hills, which is a very premier location in Hyderabad. Then on top of that, in those days, he gave 1 crore With 1 crore at that time,
Huge at that time, yeah.
we could build 50,000 square feet of building. So October, I landed here. December 6th, we put the first shovel in the ground. Then June 1, 86, we saw the first patient.
Great. Within 6 months, that was truly amazing. So LVPI has served more than 20 million people, reached out to more than 3,600 villages, more than 215 centers, more than 2,000 research papers published. That's truly amazing, sir. So building an organization of this size must have been a mammoth task. So once you started the project, how were your baby steps towards building such a great and noble institution?
I think some of the things that we did right from the beginning helped us, the fundamentals. One thing we have decided right from the beginning was that we have a clear destination where we want to reach. And we will not be disturbed on our path to that destination, on our journey. No pull, no push. Lots of people said many of our ideas, this will not work in India, that will not work in India. A classic example is iBanking. Everybody told me, forget about it. In India, nobody donates eyes. And the second myth at that time was in Indian eyes, transplants don't work. And so I said, I used to just keep smiling and get on with my work very politely. And what we started then, today we are the biggest iBank in Asia. We started the first international standard iBank in 1989. Before COVID last year, we harvested 10,500 corneas in our iBank.
Wow.
We are the biggest corneal transplantation center in the world for the past 10 years.
Great work, sir. Great.
In a country where everybody said it was impossible. So that was one thing, just not moving away from whatever we aimed for. Second was people. Our reliance and trust in the youth power. And we always chose good people with values, coming out of high schools, coming out of colleges, coming out of residency and fellowship training. And most of the people that we recruited in all cadres were right out of training programs, very, very few with previous work experience. So we could build our own culture.
Right.
Building our own culture helped us because we didn't have to waste our energy fighting against negative mindset. And there was no baggage that they brought. For most of them, this was the first job.
And they were open to fresh ideas.
That's right. And for them also, it was a challenge. They were very excited. So particularly for ophthalmology faculty, we were very particular that these people that we select should either already be or have the potential to become one of the top 5 in the country within 5 years. So that was the only question I used to ask them when they came to see me. Do you think you are up to it? Will you become one of the top 5 in 5 years?
Wow.
We'll give you everything you need. And 90% of them have proven me to be correct. Examples like Santosh Anawar, Virender Sangwan,
Yes.
some of those early examples.
Yes.
Came like that with whom I asked that question. When
Question.
and once we decide on them, one philosophy of our institute again that helped is we let them run with their dreams. No interference.
Gave them a free hand.
Whatever they ask for, they get it. Only if they don't perform, we come into the picture. Otherwise, we never interfere. So that really helped for many people to blossom into their very best. And that is not only limited to ophthalmology, same with optometry, same with technicians, same with nurse, managers, everybody. And that team building of quality people who are nurtured by the Institute for a long time is something that has helped us in creating the right values, right culture, and take us to where we are today. And I always say it was the people that made the institute. And the second point was the trust that was reposed in us by friends all over the world and supporters. Support came from every area of the world, just about all major.
Someone who remembers you and wants to convey a message. Let's hear this.
Hi, I've known Dr. G.N. Rao as a visionary institution builder, a great humanitarian, an outstanding scientist and scientific administrator, and a very elegant man with a terrific sense of humor and a wonderful wife. It's been a pleasure having known him for all these years as a great friend and a colleague on the board of LVPEI.
Yeah, Raghu is a great friend. He's one of our board members for a long time.
Yes. So, one more thing. It's been so fascinating that LVPI has managed to have 50% of its work in charity.
Mm-hmm.
So, managing such a huge institution with this must have been a daunting task. So, how did you manage to do this?
I think one thing is quality. The biggest underlying factor was quality. Right from day one, that was our driving principle. Our founding vision, in fact, was very simple: reconciling excellence with equity. Best possible care to everybody, irrespective of their ability to pay. And what we have found out was, by rigorous fiscal standards, fiscal discipline, and also by creating the right kind of systems. Like, for example, the paying right from the beginning, we have a multi-tier paying structure depending on the kind of package the patient is to take. So the people who pay are the ones, in some sense, cross-subsidize the non-paying. Until about 3-4 years ago, we were not even getting the subsidies from NPCB because we never applied. And yet we could sustain ourselves. In fact, the money that we generate from those 50% paying patients covers 90% of all our operating expenses, including education, research, rehabilitation, everything that we do. Today, if we don't get a single paisa of grant or donation, this is pre-COVID I'm talking about.
Right.
That we could still run our institute the way it is.
Must have been such an arduous task, because not just creating that culture of quality, but also maintaining it over the last more than 3 decades. Must have been such an arduous task.
Yeah, it has become a DNA of all of our staff.
LVPI has been known so much for its high quality.
People ask me, so you may talk about it, how do you know that your lower level staff understand it? So I said they may not be able to articulate it, but if you go to a housekeeping lady who keeps our floors meticulously clean, that is a reflection of our understanding of excellence. 24/7, you can't point out any area of the institute which is not clean.
Not clean.
So that's an example. At the other end is, of course, the surgical competence. At the other end is the competence of our researchers with their outstanding research that they do. So the two ends, everybody understands that, and I think that has helped us thinking along the same lines, clear understanding. Right from the beginning, we never had the culture of any bribes, corruption at all. So everything from day one, because everything was transparent. Every single paisa is accounted for. We never take any cash payments of any kind from anybody. And we also brought about as much an egalitarian culture as possible. Like, many people are surprised when they visit us. When we go for lunch to the cafeteria, I sit on the same table that a housekeeping lady sits, and we eat together. These are the kinds of some of the cultural characteristics that from the beginning brought about that bond as a team.
So Yes, speaking of team news, you mentioned even earlier, like as they say, a team means together everyone achieves more, and it was so good, and you were lucky and fortunate, and it was your, choice of people that actually helped you build such a great team. And I'd like you to listen to some of the senior doctors in your team who would like to say something.
Okay.
Dr. Nag Rao has got three important and unique characteristics: envisioning, empowering, and measuring. He foresees upcoming new technique and technology in eye care nearly 5 years ahead of time, prepares himself and all of us to welcome it. Dr. Rao handpicks people and gives them enough scope and opportunity to become stars in their own. At the same time, he always measures and asks an important question: is this new eye care going to impact people who are socially poor and marginalized?
Thanks for the opportunity, Dr. Heror. I would like to share an episode that reflects our value of equity. Dr. Rao has taken our value of equity beyond providing care to those who cannot afford to pay. The goal is not only to provide care with compassion, but also not lose sight of the self-respect of the patients. Dr. Rao has not allowed us to increase our consultation for our paying patients in the OPD for a long time. He bothered that the middle class people will not be able to access our system if the entry point charges are high. He also worried that the self-respect of these patients might not allow them to access care in our non-paying section. One day when I was a director of the Hyderabad campus, he called me from a small town in Andhra. He apparently met somebody who could not afford our semi-private cataract charges. It's a different matter that the charges in that small town area were same as what we would charge in our semi-private package. I was in that area a week before. The point is that he was always striving to make sure that the middle class people can access our care with self-respect. The lesson for all of us is that just providing compassionate care is not enough. We have to respect the self-respect of the patients. The patient is doing us a favor by putting his trust, giving his trust, not the other way around. That is equity Dr. Rao's way or the LVP way. Thank you.
That was so incredible, sir. Thank you, Dr. Das. Thank you, Dr. Chandrasekhar, sir. And kudos to you, sir, Dr. Rao.
Thank you.
Sir, in 2016, LVPI set a world record of 2,000 plus corneal transplant surgeries in a single year. Like we were talking about corneal transplantation just a few minutes ago. And this was the highest ever from any single center throughout the world.
Yeah.
And like you said, you began eye banking. So you were the pioneer in eye banking and corneal transplantation. So what were the roadblocks that you faced in developing the eye banks?
I think in a way I circumvented the existing roadblocks in India by seeking the help of American colleagues and American friends who overcame those problems about 15 years earlier to that. Even until early 80s, we had a lot of problem in the US getting eyes, and we had to do transplants in the middle of the night as an emergency. But then came a gentleman called Frederick Griffith in Baltimore who came up with the idea of grief counselors and hospital cornea retrieval. Literally overnight, that transformed the landscape of corneal transplantation in that country. From having to do emergency surgeries at midnight, before I left the last couple of years, I could schedule my corneal transplant patients like I did my cataract surgery patients. So there was a lesson for me. So I wanted their help. And right from the beginning, we wanted to go that route. And I think luckily circumstances were favorable. Around that time,
Just hold you for a moment. You mentioned Mr. Frederick.
Griffith.
Frederick Griffith. He remembers you, sir. He has a message for you.
Oh, okay.
Like to hear it?
Yeah, did you contact him?
Yes, sir. Just listen.
This was a message sent by Mr. Frederick Griffith, ex-president of Tissue Banks International of USA. And I quote, "Back in the 70s, my organization had expanded our iBanking activities to respond to requests to open iBanks outside the US. One of these requests came from Dr. Nagarao. As a result, I made a site visit to his headquarters in the L.V. Prasad Institute in Hyderabad. On arrival, I met Dr. Rao for the first time and he began to fill me in on his hopes and dreams to build a world-class eye care facility, including an eye bank. He put on his desk the architectural drawings allotted for the eye bank. Upon looking at the plans, I pointed out that the space was too small to accomplish the level of eye banking he was striving for, at which I pointed out to another space on the plans and said this would be ideal. He quickly reacted but was sorry that the space was to be his personal office. The next day we met and again he put the plans on the desk and said, 'Here, take the space for the eye bank.' And with that began a close and productive relationship. Everything we requested was approved and in 6 months the eye bank was up and running and achieved 1000 corneas a year for transplantation. To know Dr. Nagarao is to admire Dr. Nagarao. His dedication to his work is exemplary." I unquote.
Yeah. Frederick was very, very helpful, very generous with his help. And that's how we could get the iBank started. And that example helped us. Then in Hyderabad, to start the hospital cornea retrieval, we were again fortunate. There's the famous Nizam's Institute of Medical Sciences. The director then was one Dr. Subbarao. He was formerly professor of radiology at Albert Einstein in New York, returned to India with about the same idea that I had, to come back and serve here. And I went and met him. He was also very proactive, forward-looking. And when I explained to him and I said, "You have to give us permission to start the program at Nizam's," he readily agreed. That was the beginning of the first HCRP. And even till today, Nizam's provides us a significant number of corneas each year. Then that was multiplied into multiple large hospitals in Hyderabad and later into the state. And then now throughout India, many HCRP programs.
Yes, sir.
A catalyst for a revolution in eye banking in our country. And that HCRP is what helped us. Then a gentleman in those days, a family relative or friend who used to be the chair and managing director of a company called Navbharat Ferro Alloys, Dr. Subbarao Devaneni, he donated the initial money to start the eye bank. And that's how the Ramayama International Eye Bank got started in 1989.
Sir, and your efforts also benefited so many more others, even in Mumbai. There's something someone wants to say to you. And before I move on, thank you, Frederick, sir, for your inputs. I'll just a moment.
My path crossed that of Dr. G.N. Rao when I returned from my fellowship at the Wilmer Eye Hospital. Corneally blind patients were seeing perfectly well again after a corneal transplant. I recognized that we needed good quality corneal tissue to achieve this. The International Federation of Eye and Tissue Banks USA wanted Dr. G.N. Rao to endorse my setting up a world-class eye bank in Mumbai. And he did. Mumbai will remain ever grateful for the Eye Bank Coordination and Research Center, which was then set up and has provided 11,000 corneas till date. Dr. Rao has championed the cause of eradicating corneal blindness in India, and his vision of 2020 for all has been the driving force for this great individual.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dr. Nishita. And thank you, sir, on behalf of Mumbai.
give my regards to her. I haven't seen her for a while, Nishita.
He remembers you very fondly, sir. Dr. Rao, you were instrumental in combining excellent eye care along with great education. And as they say, Vidya Danam Athaparam. So, how did that passion for education develop?
This happened because of the exposure to American system. The excellence of education standards in those academic centers and the research. It always kind of intrigued me. Why is it that we cannot do it? How is it that we cannot do the same thing in our country? And that's why the simple vision initially was for us to be in Hyderabad, an academic eye center along the lines of an American eye center that will have clinical care, education, and research. And education also, I have learned a lot of foundational values from Professor L.P. Agarwal at RP Center. In those days, education standards, they were extremely high and rigorous. And those were many things, learnings from that experience in RP Center that were further heightened by my exposure to the American academic education system. So looking at all that, I was very clear that we will be an academic education center when we start a center in India. So education, in fact, started even before we saw the first patient. We used to have journal clubs in the Prasad Labs auditorium next door to our institute because Mr. Prasad had a film processing labs next door to our institute.
Okay.
We used to use their auditorium one day a week to have journal clubs and invite all the practicing ophthalmologists of Hyderabad, and we ran them.
Wow.
So we always had that. And similarly, research. From the first patient itself, it was research because we were made sure that every patient medical record documentation is along the lines of an academic medical center. So automatically, every patient record becomes a research document for clinical research. So these were very clear: education, research, and clinical care of high quality. The only thing new that we added, that without any knowledge of that, I didn't have any idea, experience, background, was somehow I thought it has to be one-stop shop. So we included rehabilitation of people with irreversible blindness. So these were the 4 components initially when we started LVP. That was added a little bit later, but these were the.
So, and you must be feeling so proud that LVP today, nearly 2/3 of all the trained corneal transplant surgeons who are trained in India are trained in LVPI, right?
Yeah.
So that means not just a direct impact, but it's been also so much of an indirect impact through so many eye care professionals, and all those values that you just spoke, especially regarding the documentation, has gone down to through all your fellows. And there's one person who remembers this and wants to convey a message. Would you like to hear it?
Sure.
Dr. Gulapalli Rao has been my mentor for the last 3 decades. I joined the fellowship in the year 1990, and I had the privilege of being mentored by Dr. Rao one-on-one, which also meant that I was in the line of fire, and I did receive a flack every now and then, sometimes a whole day without a break, which almost brought you to tears. But what I learned was precision. I learned to keep a sharp, keen eye, pick up observations, note them down, learn to commit and put things in black and white. I learned to make mistakes, but I also learned from those mistakes. And today, what I am, I owe to those 12 months that I spent under his guidance. The mentor-mentee relationship continues even today. After completing the fellowship a few years later, he sponsored me, like he did sponsor many others, on a short-term fellowship to the University of Rochester. where one got to see what ophthalmology was on an international platform. I was appointed as a board member, as one of the old fellows or alumni. This tradition continues even till date. And this is probably the only institute I know of in the country where past students or alumni are on the board of members. I'd like to conclude with a few lines. You have guided us on a path untread. You quell the darkness with the light you held. You opened our minds for us to feel the pains of those who cannot see. The legacy you created is a gift to all, a dream come true for us to call. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sangeeta. Sir, would you like to say anything to her?
Sangeeta is one of our best ever. In fact, I wanted her to stay on with us, but by then her heart was stolen by somebody in Pune. So she ran away. It was a difficult race for us to win.
Sir, LVPI has trained more than 20,000 eye care professionals globally. So, like you were saying, not only ophthalmologists, but also optometrists. And in fact, there is this young man whose eyes lit up when he heard your name. And he too remembers LVPI very fondly and wanted to share something with you. He'd like to say something. I'll just...
Hello LVP, hello GN Rao Garu. My name is Guru Samineni and I'm a consultant optometrist working in Anila Hospital since 2.5 years post my post-graduation fellowship in LVP. I would like to thank you to give me a wonderful opportunity to be a part of LVP family. The lessons what LVP has taught me has not only made me a better clinician but a better person as well. Among many few lessons what LVP has taught me are the keen listening and observation skills, the commitment for hard working and sustaining, the process of learning and understanding, and the method of teaching and learning. Once again, thanks a lot for shaping my life.
Yeah. How did he end up with you? He looks like he's a Telugu guy.
Yes, he is a Telugu guy. He stays around in my area, and he came to us. Two, in fact, optometrists are from LVP in my place.
Great.
It must be so satisfying for you when you see that you have touched the lives of so many people and helped them progress. Not only in education, so like you were mentioning about the other community eye care also that you have added. So you have focused a lot on community eye care and eye care policies and planning. And you have taken the most advanced technologies to the doorstep, of the remotest villages in India. So how difficult was it back then, and today what do you think are the biggest challenges that we face in community eye care?
Actually, back then when I started with the first secondary center, everybody said I was going crazy, because we selected one of the poorest areas in the remotest part of Andhra Pradesh and a small village. And even my colleagues, many thought this guy is going bonkers now. And why is he spending this money there? We could buy another laser with that money here, kind of thing. But I was challenged by a couple of friends. You did this in a city, high quality center. Show us that it can be done in a rural area. So that really got to me, and I said, why is it not possible to create a center of quality in a rural area? So we worked on it, worked very hard, a lot of people together, and created this model of what we call high quality comprehensive eye care at the secondary level. Initially, it was meant to be at secondary level. Only in the last 3-4 years, as some of the centers matured, we thought we could experiment with migrating some of the tertiary care elements into those centers. And that was possible for us only because, again, of the, in some sense, the uniqueness of what we are. Like, for example, you take corneal transplants we are doing in those places because we have a large cornea faculty. So very easily, one of them can go once a month for a couple of days to one of these centers and operate there. And the people who are working there are the ophthalmologists who went through our comprehensive fellowship.
Right.
They know very well how to take care of post-operative corneal grafts. And then we have technology connectivity. If there is any doubt and anything has to be discussed by showing the patient, we have drone slit lamps. While the patient sits there, we can examine them from high.
Teleophthalmology. Yeah.
Live.
Plus, yes, live.
The patient while they sit on a slit lamp there. And those kinds of things, advantages were there. And then we have a bank that has plenty of tissue available that we could send to these centers and do it. Similarly, we did for complex glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy by placing lasers there and all that. So slowly we began to migrate because we strongly believe 70% of the blindness is in those areas.
Right.
And we have to go there. If we have provide the right kind of thing, 85-90% of the problems can be solved right there. It saves so much money for them and the families and to that community. And it turns out the future for these centers is brighter than the tertiary centers in urban areas today, post-COVID.
Yeah.
As we reopened our services in June, we are realizing in the past 3.5, 4 months, our secondary centers and vision centers in rural areas have regained 75-80% of the patients, whereas our tertiary centers are still around 45 to 55%.
Okay.
So in future, more and more of these rural folks are not going to travel to cities.
Right.
Like to go to the centers closer to them. The second thing that's going to happen is there'll be no more eye camps the way we were used to.
Right.
We
That's a new normal, right?
We have small permanent centers in rural areas to serve the local communities. So from that perspective, what we did over the past 25 years, I believe is going to give us rich dividends in the future now. And now we are increasingly connecting them with technology. We have all kinds of technology connection. We are now into big data analysis. We are now into using all that, getting into the artificial intelligence, all those kinds of advanced technologies. So combination of, I always said, whoever can combine talent and technology will be the ultimate winner in the field of it.
Yes. So that's great, inspiring work. Great, inspiring work. So coming to your personal career, at the peak of your career, how was a typical weekday in your life?
I think that was the beginning years of LVP. It used to be 24/7 more or less. I used to be with patient care 4 days a week, 2 days outpatient and 2 days operating room, teaching the fellows. As Sangeeta said, she got my full attention of all kinds, and even used to fight with me and all that stuff. So, and ultimately, she has become one of my closest friends. So I think I enjoyed working with those bright young minds and people that they put you on your toes, and then you really have to be up there in the knowledge and all that to deal with them. So that was exciting. And then we were still building the institute, doing the clinical work, raising support for the institute, traveling a lot around the world to do different kinds of things. Then we had to train every cadre, just about ophthalmologists, optometrists, nurses, ourselves. So very, very busy. I think the only hobby I had, I always say, was sleep whenever I had time. I think it wouldn't have happened without the 150% support from my wife. I didn't know how she managed home. I think regretfully I neglected the children. I wasn't much of a father to them in those days. So that was it. There's nothing called work-life balance.
Balance, yes. How was your idea of work-life balance?
15 years, I don't know. I'm the wrong guy to give any advice on that. I don't know if it is possible at all.
Possible at all. So, and how did you handle all this success? You have had such great success in your life. And what's it like to be the Dr. G.N. Rao?
Very simply, be yourself.
That's modesty, sir.
I don't think they come and go. I don't, when people get excited, oh, your institute is ranked number 1 or 2, I said, that's fine. I think the important thing is for us to make sure 95% of people who come to us, they leave us happy. That's the indicator we should look for.
Right.
Not what we are ranked and what rank we get.
Right. So there's someone who remembers.
There are many good people, there are many good institutions. 1 year, one person gets, another year, another person gets, same with institutions. So we shouldn't be either too excited or too disappointed with these. We have to carry on with our basic principles and do what we want to do. And if we continue that, you will continue to do well and you will continue to be successful.
Great one, sir. So there's something someone remembers about you and wants to give you a message. And just connect.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Van Lansing, and I'm here in Mexico. And I would like to say a few words about my very good friend Gulapalli Nag Rao. For most of us who are friends of him, he's just Nag. He made that very clear. Even when I was just a very junior doctor and took over the position of Vision 2020 IAPB Regional Coordinator for Latin America. God, more years than I really care to remember. But from that very first day, I just realized what the quality of that man. I mean, he's just really outstanding. I cannot say too many kind words. So that was the first impression that I got. He was very down to earth, very approachable. And whenever I needed him, I remember one day that someone had asked us from one of the governments, I think it was in Argentina, that they needed a one-pager on what Vision 2020 was. So I had to put that together. I sent that to him, and he immediately replied with some corrections. He made time for every one of us. And every crazy idea that I've ever had, he's always been there for me. He's helped support endorsements whenever I've requested that for different awards or a letter of recommendation. He's always been there. That's, I think, the best that I can say. And what to say professionally? Well, you all know what the LV Prasad Eye Institute is. And even with that, he's also been very helpful. So my two main hats, I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Help Me See in New York, and also work here at the Mexican Institute of Ophthalmology, fondly called the IMO, or just EMO, the acronym in Spanish. Every single thing that I've requested from him, he's made that space and made people available. Whether it was to place a simulator there and do a pilot testing for junior residents, to accept 2 or 3 residents and fellows at the LV Prasad. So that exchange has been wonderful. He's always been there for me and for the institutions that I work with. That's the quality, the kindness of this man, who asked me to produce this short video, asked me also to say, how would I like to be introduced? And I would say a colleague and a friend of Nag Rao. Those are the 2 best titles I can have. Thank you for your attention, and congratulations, Nag, on all your achievements and for being such a wonderful human being.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Van, and always being there for others. So that's an adorable thing. Yeah. So it's been so fascinating listening to you. One question comes to my mind is, if you were given a second chance to relive your life and do things all over again, would you have done anything differently?
Not too much differently, but I probably would have made an effort to work on what you were asking me, a little like a work-life balance. So, but other than that, the only thing is I really didn't give much time to my family. So,
Yes, sir, but your family is so proud of you. I'm sure you would love to hear what they have to say for you. And I'm sure Madam has had a great role in your success.
she
Like
did,
you said,
he keeps me anchored.
I'll just make you listen to what they have to say. Yeah.
I'm recording a short video, as requested, about my father, Dr. Gulapalli Nageswara Rao, and LV Prasad Eye Institute. And I just want to mention a few things over the decades since my parents started LVP that have stayed with me and are important to me personally. And the first is reflecting on the leap that my parents took in their 30s and 40s to return to India, to move to Hyderabad, and to open LVP. And what a leap into the unknown that was, and the work involved in moving their family and really restarting their professional careers at that stage. The second is the commitment to certain principles and ideals that they were dedicated to upholding and that they have upheld since 1986. And the third is something, as with all of these, that is larger than my father, is larger than my parents, and extends to the entire LVP community, which is their excitement about excellence, their commitment to the patients and communities LVP is meant to serve, and their pride in the work that they do.
This is a message conveyed by Mr. Raghav Gulapalli. I quote, "My father, Dr. Rao, never forgot his humble beginnings, the pain and insecurities of the people in the villages of India. This perspective has been the North Star for many of his decisions with regards to the trajectory of LVPI. LVPI does not suffer from the poverty of ambition, which plagues so many in the developing world. Rather than set our sights low, he set our sights high. Rather than being satisfied with being good enough, he set our sights on being the best in the world, with a clear mission of reconciling excellence with equity regardless of complexity or cost of care. We have always understood to do so we need to partner and learn from the best organizations in the world. And now, in the winter of his career, Dad continues to push the LVPI family to embrace new paradigms in research and technology to advance towards our North Star of providing equitable, excellent, efficient care everywhere for the most disenfranchised populations." I unquote.
That's so sweet of them, sir. I'm sure you must be happy listening to them.
Yes, I was. Yeah, thank you. I didn't realize you contacted all these people.
Sir, it needs a lot of courage to do what you did, to tread on rocky, untrodden paths. I'm sure it must have been a very difficult task. So when you faced all this stress, what was your way of beating the stress and how did you unwind at that time?
My unwinding is, earlier I used to read a lot of biographies and light fiction. I read a lot of light fiction. But another stress buster for me in the evenings when I come home nowadays, past few years, has been to listen to the Telugu news when the politicians abuse each other. That's like a
entertainment.
Entertainment for me. So those kinds of things and some silly movies. And that's what I do to unwind. And now I think in the past 4 or 5 months, my wife and I are watching a lot of Netflix and some wonderful movies from where we are learning a lot of history and those kinds of things. And if you haven't watch this show called Doc Martin on Netflix. It's about a GP in a London, small coastal village of London, in England. It's a beautiful, beautiful show. Beautiful show. You're relaxing and you enjoy it.
I'll go back and watch it.
You learn it. I learn a lot. It's 10 seasons of it, and we are addicted to it.
Okay. So one last question before we move on to the rapid fire round. So what do you think 10 years down the line, where do you see ophthalmology to be and what role do you see LVPI playing in it?
I think 10 years down the road, I hope while there'll be a lot of advances technologically, and the kind of practice will be probably significantly different, probably radically different from what it is today. Because there'll be a lot of advances, not only in technology, but also in research, understanding of disease, the role played by genetics, immunological mechanisms, advances in pharmacology. So all these things combined, the entire approach to disease will be different. Both the understanding and a lot more diseases can be treated much more effectively medically. And the surgical techniques will probably become simpler and hopefully well within the reach of an average ophthalmologist, so that more ophthalmologists can perform these surgical techniques.
And have access to them, yes.
But what would be more satisfying to me, and I hope here is where LVP could be a world leader, is to give the benefit of all such advances to the most disadvantaged person in the world. And how do we do that? How do we reach them? How do they access this? So that's the thing that has to be done. And I think a large part in that direction has to be contributed by the governments. They have to invest. I think this pandemic is a big lesson for all the governments in the world.
And an eye-opener.
If you don't invest in healthcare, there'll be another one in a few years without question. It's not a question of if, it is a question of when.
When?
What? And if we continue to sleep without waking up, the next time around, I think the price will be even heavier. Even now, we don't know the ultimate price of this pandemic for the world. So it would be even higher next time. So I really wish LVPI will take a leadership in those kinds of areas, and in whichever shape it takes and taken by the next leader of LVP, my hope for LVP is to remain at that cutting edge of remaining impactful in the lives of millions of people and touching.
Thank you, sir, for the pearls of wisdom and really lots of best wishes to LVP too. So now we'll move on to the rapid fire round. So this would be a quick rapid succession question and answer round, where I'd like to request you to answer immediately as to whatever is the first thought that comes to your mind.
Yeah, I'll try.
Shall we start?
Yeah.
So you've been a role model to thousands. Who has been your role model? So who is the guru's guru?
It's not one. I think there were a few people who ignited me. Professor Ramalinga Swami, former director of AIIMS and Director General of ICMR. Professor L.P. Agarwal, and my two mentors in the US. And a number of my teachers in the rural school where I went to as a kid. I went to the government district board school, and the quality of teachers there was just outstanding. They gave me the very foundations of mathematics, science, English, Telugu, languages, and the other subjects. In those days, the standard of education in the village schools was very high. So from every one of them, I got a dose of benefit. And as I moved along later on, when I got involved with International Agency for Prevention of Blindness, academia, I got the opportunity to interact with some of the best brains in the world, not only in ophthalmology and medical sciences, but in other areas. And they were all my teachers.
Right, sir. First thing that comes to your mind when I say the following. Number 1, country.
India.
Number 2, passion.
alleviate blindness.
Fair enough. Number 3, LVPI.
Values.
Wow. And number 4, discipline.
Must for everybody.
Yes. So you've achieved so much in life. Is there anything that you regret?
No, not really. I've been a very fortunate life. I can't ask for anything more.
God has been kind, sir. So if you were to choose between talent and hard work, what would you choose?
Hard work anyway.
Right.
Talent alone will not get you too far.
Right. So who would you want to be reborn as?
Myself.
Great. One thing you would like to change about medical education?
Better quality teachers.
Fair enough. What do you enjoy more, sir? Being a clinician or an entrepreneur?
No, I would enjoy being a combination that I evolved into. I had the benefit of everything in ophthalmology. No one thing will really be adequate.
Right. Yeah. So what do you consider as the highest moment in your life?
Highest moment. Probably, obviously, Hall of Fame, I guess.
Yeah. One thing that you would like people to remember about you? Of course, they'll remember you for everything, but anything that you would wish?
Well, that I tried to be fair.
One thing the world doesn't know about you?
Doesn't know about me. My name was Gandhi when I was in the village in the first 10 years of my life.
Okay. One thing you wish you could change about yourself?
That I wish I could sleep only 4 hours a day and be happy.
And the last one, something that you enjoy doing and wish you had more time for?
I think meeting my old friends.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. That was truly insightful.
Thank you so much. It's
So we have seen.
Congratulations on the series, and I didn't realize. I thought it was just you and me talking. I didn't know you did so much groundwork for it.
So it was so nice speaking to you. So before we sign off, what piece of advice would you like to give all the viewers, all the ophthalmologists, all the young people out there who look up to you?
Decide on, if you are talking about a career, decide on what you want to be. That is, decide on your destination. And then decide on how you want to get there. And then don't change that, whatever may be the pull and push. You will get there.
Great, sir. Great. Thank you with all my heart for sparing your valuable time and for sharing parts of your life with us. And I'd also like to thank everyone who gave their inputs and who helped me with this interview. Dr. T.P. Das, Dr. Chandrasekhar, Dr. Prashant Garg, Dr. Virendra Sangwan, Dr. Somashila, Dr. Van, Mr. Frederick, Dr. Sangeeta, Dr. Nishita, Dr. Vinay Agarwal, Vaidya, Raghav, everyone associated with LVP, and Mr. Venkat. I'd also like to thank FDC, Pixel for their technical support, and my staff at Anila Hospital, my IT team, for helping me put all of this together. I enjoyed, sir, every moment today. I hope you also enjoyed it, and I'm sure all our viewers would enjoy it as immensely as I did today. We wish you good health, happiness, best wishes to you and your family, and we wish LVPI many, many more successes in the future. So today I've had a mind-blowing experience, but I would also always cherish the memories of the first day that I met you. This was almost 10 months ago in Calcutta.
I think, yeah. Thank you.
And after listening to your inspiring life history, I would like to conclude by saying, so when you had the choice, you took the one road that was less traveled by, and that has made all the difference not only to you, but also to thousands of people around you. Yes, I truly believe that you have many, many, many more miles to go ahead of you. Thank you so much. And I have learned a lot today, tremendously, from our interaction. And I think one lesson that we have learned is we need to give wings to our dreams. And I'm sure you'll agree that there's nothing more blissful than witnessing your dreams fly high, and your life has been a perfect example of this. Thank you so much, sir, once again, and thank you all. Goodbye and see you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.